Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you are not. I am EDJ, and now we have finally arrived to the assassination and death of Julius Caesar. Well, it's gonna be a little hard parting with Caesar right now, but we all knew this was coming, the inevitable, right? Oh boy, so let's just get to it. If you want to watch this original video without me talking or pausing to talk, the link's always down in the description down below. Without any further ado, we ought to just get into it. Let's watch the assassination of Julius Caesar.
Caesar's reforms had left a huge impact on the social and political life of Rome, and although his popularity with the masses was immense, there were men at the top of the Roman political ladder who were plotting against him. In this episode, we shall look at the motivations of these conspirators, which led to the assassination of Caesar on the Ides of March 44 BC. According to the Roman historian Suetonius, Gaius Julius Caesar was a big fan of trimming, plucking, and shaving his body hair, and Caesar's reforms had already led some to see him as a tyrant, and this was compounded by rumors that Caesar planned to overthrow the Republic and become something the Romans hated most, a king of Rome. These rumors were not unfounded. As dictator, Caesar was proclaimed father of the country, sacrifices and games were given in his honor, and his statue was included alongside those of the gods in the procession before the games. He was
my goodness, seriously? Okay, yeah, that gives off quite a signal, right? Here's my statue next to the gods. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's not... Yeah, I could see how these examples can be quite damning, right? On like Caesar's like image to some of these guys.
Given a special chair in the Senate made of ivory and gold, in effect a throne. Furthermore, Cleopatra had recently arrived in Rome, igniting rumors that Caesar wanted to install a Hellenistic-style monarchy, with himself as king and Cleopatra as queen. Caesar took to wearing triumphal garb, a laurel crown of victory, and red boots, and on one occasion didn't stand to greet the senators. The Roman kings of the past had worn red shoes, and they combined with the crown, throne, and perceived disrespect to the Senate to make the rumors look true.
Yeah, I'll admit, it does really look like he wants to be a king. And like I said, I don't doubt that Caesar, I think the famous, example is like Caesar basically rejecting the crown or the title of king, but I don't think he rejected the power, mind you. He just resented the title as Romans would, but he obviously, you could argue that he was acting like one, and these examples aren't. He had to know what he was doing, right? Putting a statue with the gods, wearing these red... Surely Julius knew what he was doing, right? Which also, it's like, what was he thinking? Like, I wish I knew what was going through the man's mind. I really do.
A small minority liked the idea. They adorned a statue of Caesar with a crown, and even once hailed him as a king. A plebeian tribune, Marullus, had them imprisoned for that, and in response, Caesar accused Marullus of having orchestrated the events in order to damage his political position, and had the tribune imprisoned. Marullus's office was sacrosanct, so this was seen as proof of Caesar's tyrannical ways and disregard for the Republic. For some, it was also proof that Caesar did in fact want the title of king, and that he punished Marullus because the tribune had been imprisoning Caesar's supporters. According to Appian, on one occasion, Caesar was watching a ceremony for the Lupercal Games, which included Antony, as consul for that year, and the other priests running naked and anointing people. At one point, Antony approached Caesar with a crown. Some in the crowd groaned at this, others applauded, but Caesar refused the crown, pleasing the majority of people. Again, Antony tried to crown Caesar, and again he refused, drawing huge applause from the crowd. This has often been interpreted as a staged affair to see how the people would react, with Caesar hoping that he would be welcomed as king. Combined with Caesar's other actions, some were convinced that Caesar would use his powers as dictator to become a monarch. In the ancient sources, it is these reasons that are given for why the conspirators decided to plot against Caesar and later dubbed themselves liberators. However, there is also evidence to counter these claims. Caesar forbade any from calling him king, saying that he was not king but Caesar, and Dio points out that he did not ask for any honors.
Yeah, but then again, as we know in history, just the name Caesar is synonymous with king, right? Or emperor, like Kaiser, Tsar, or from the name Caesar, like he doesn't need to be referred to as a king. Caesar on its own, just that name, he managed to make his name a title for king, right? Like, that's amazing, right?
Some of them were enacted by his past enemies, like Cicero, eager to curry his favor, while many of his allies likely thought that he really did deserve the honors bestowed on him. It was in Caesar's interests to therefore try to appease both sides, accepting some honors while denying the more egregious ones. Caesar's punishment of Marullus was arguably overzealous, but it may have been done to try and maintain neutrality with the party that apparently did want him as king. According to Dio, Caesar's wearing of a triumphal crown was to try and hide his baldness. Similarly, Plutarch claims that Caesar not standing to meet the Senate was due to Caesar's illness, which often made him dizzy and faint if he...
Of course, like I said, with Caesar, there's always a double-edged sword. There's always, you could say something is tyrannical, but you could also point at an example of it not being tyrannical. Though I will say the argument is just him wanting to hide his baldness is the funniest one. Well, actually, he was balding, dude. He didn't want to show that off, like, you know. Oh, man. You know, yeah, overall, like I said, with Caesar, there's always a double-edged sword, and both examples make sense, so that's why, like I said, to me, he's an enigma.
He stood up quickly after being sat for too long. Lastly, there is the anecdote of Antony crowning Caesar. When one considers the image of a naked, oiled Antony offering the crown to Caesar, it's harder to see it as a cunning political ploy. In fact, it's arguably much closer to a joke in bad taste, or a charade to amuse the masses. Finally, one must also consider the question of why Caesar would have wanted to be king. As Plutarch and Dio both point out, he effectively had all the power of a king, so why also have a title that carried such heavy political baggage?
Exactly, that's what I was saying. Like, he rejected the title, but the power is a completely different thing, which he seemingly didn't reject. I don't know. Like, you know, it's kind of like what Augustus did, right? He didn't refer to himself as an emperor. Like, the term emperor I don't think was used, or maybe it was. Either way, I don't think he presented himself as that, but he essentially was, right? So, yeah.
In Rome. It's hard to think that Caesar would not have known how foolhardy such an idea was. Some modern historians have suggested that the conspirators' idea that they were saving the Republic was mere propaganda, and that many were motivated by more personal factors. In total, there were 60 conspirators, all senators. We know the names of 20, but only 12 are described in enough detail in the sources for their personal motives to be assumed. Marcus Junius Brutus had fought with Pompey, and was spared after Pharsalus. Welcomed by Caesar, he was appointed governor of Cisalpine Gaul. Brutus's mother was a lover of Caesar, and the two men were close. False but still humiliating rumors circulated that he was Caesar's bastard, and even that his mother had prostituted his half-sister to Caesar. Ancient and modern historians have claimed that they were likely a key motivator for him. However, Brutus was a supposed descendant of the semi-legendary Brutus, who had ousted the last king of Rome, so many insisted that he be the one to take action against Caesar's kingship. He was the conspirator who had the most genuinely idealistic motive to assassinate Caesar. An experienced general with a solid military career, Gaius Cassius Longinus was also forgiven by Caesar in the aftermath of the Battle of Pharsalus. He became a legate in Caesar's army in Egypt, but refused to fight against Pompeians. Nevertheless, he was earmarked by Caesar to be governor of Syria. However, Caesar had hampered his career a few times, preventing him from becoming edile and postponing his consulship. Though he was made legate, Cassius probably deserved a higher command based on his experience. It's apparent that Caesar never really trusted him, and he was right not to. Cassius had plotted to kill Caesar from as early as 47 BC, and genuinely hated Caesar. Certainly motivated in part by his Pompeian loyalties, Cassius disliked Caesar for personal reasons, and was the most active about the plot. Decimus Junius Brutus had fought with Caesar in Gaul, and was one of his most promising subordinates. He was made praetor by Caesar, and was set to be the governor of Cisalpine Gaul after Marcus Brutus's term. Caesar loved Decimus, as shown in Caesar's will that named him as a second-degree heir, a fact unknown to Decimus. This meant that if Octavian had died before, Decimus would have been legally adopted by Caesar and been his heir.
Wow.
His motivation is incredibly difficult to ascertain, the best argument usually coming down to pure greed for power. Another veteran of the Gallic Wars, Gaius Trebonius, was one of Caesar's most reliable legates. Caesar had appointed him as urban praetor, then governor of Hispania Ulteria, and finally consul in 45 BC. However, his year as consul was undermined by Caesar, who appointed a replacement consul for Trebonius's colleague, who died just one day before the end of his term, which was considered a mockery of the consulship. Trebonius may well have seen this as an insult, motivating him to join the plot. Previously, he also participated in a failed plot against Caesar, suggesting to Antony that they should murder Caesar. The latter rejected the offer, and the plot had not developed any further. One of Caesar's strongest supporters, Tillius Cimber, was rewarded for his loyalty with the governorship of Bithynia and Pontus. However, he was deeply annoyed that Caesar did not recall his brother, Publius, who was exiled for unknown reasons, possibly leading to his involvement. Publius Servilius Casca was one of the oldest friends of Caesar. Casca appears to have fallen on hard times financially, and may well have been angry that his old friend had not helped him more in this regard. His brother Gaius joined the plot to support Publius. A tribune of the plebs, Pontius Aquila, was publicly mocked by Caesar when he refused to stand during one of Caesar's triumphs. He also had some land confiscated and given to Brutus's mother, Caesar's lover, giving him a deeply personal motivation for joining the plot. Another man who was Caesar's legate in the Gallic Wars, Servius Sulpicius Galba, was a thrifty man. He had guaranteed a loan of Pompey's, and when Pompey's land was confiscated, he inherited the debt. Galba was annoyed and had complained to Caesar, who promptly paid the debt himself. Another debt later emerged from these same circumstances, which Caesar was less willing to help with, much to Galba's outrage. There were also rumors that Caesar may have been sleeping with his wife. Quintus Ligarius's life was spared by Caesar after the Battle of Thapsus, but he was later put on trial for apparently conspiring with Juba of Numidia and threatened with exile. Cicero defended him, and Caesar pardoned him. Nevertheless, he had been deeply depressed at the idea of being exiled. Furthermore, Caesar had executed a relative of his for taking up arms against Caesar despite already having been pardoned. These reasons, and friendship with Brutus, likely brought him into the conspiracy. Another Caesarian legate, Lucius Minucius Basileus, who served in the Gallic Wars, was made praetor in 45 BC, but instead of being given a province afterwards, was given a huge sum of money. This apparently deeply insulted him, motivating him to join the conspirators. The last in the group was Quintus Antistius, who seemed to have joined the plot purely out of devotion to his close friend Brutus. Little to nothing is known of the other 8 named conspirators. In all likelihood, some really did believe that they were ridding Rome of a tyrant, as they would later claim. However,
yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think there is certainly personal matters that made them hate Caesar, but I do also believe there is an era, hey, we're ridding Rome of a tyrant. I think there's a bit of both, I would reckon.
Modern historians are also right to suggest that it's equally likely that a good many of them were involved, either based on personal grudges or wanting to be a part of the creation of the new order. The sources vary on precisely who was the instigator, but Cassius and Brutus were the ringleaders, the former doing much of the recruiting, with the latter being more of a figurehead, his name and reputation crucial in convincing many others to join. Gradually they convinced the 58 other conspirators to join the plot. The conspirators did consider one of the most influential senators, Cicero, but concluded that he would not commit or would simply slow things down. At first, it was proposed that they kill Caesar, Antony and Lepidus. The latter two were the next most powerful Caesarians, so killing them would effectively remove all the faction's significant leadership. Brutus, however, opposed this. He argued that this was to be a surgical removal of a tyrant, not a widespread political purge. The other conspirators relented. Caesar would soon be leaving on his Parthian campaign, where, surrounded by soldiers, he would be untouchable, so they had to strike while he was in Rome. When Caesar announced a Senate meeting on the Ides of March, just 4 days before he was scheduled to leave, the conspirators decided that this would be the perfect opportunity. Caesar would be separated from his entourage, the conspirators could all be in the same place without raising suspicion, and they were confident that, when the attack began, other senators would quickly come to help them. Gladiators were scheduled to fight in the theatre adjacent to the Senate chamber the day of the meeting, and this would give the conspirators the perfect excuse to have armed soldiers nearby, as Decimus Brutus owned many gladiators. The night before the session, Caesar invited Lepidus and Decimus to his house for dinner. They talked long into the night, and eventually the philosophical question was asked, what is the best way to die? To which Caesar responded without hesitation that a sudden death was best. Throughout the night, Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, is said to have had dreams of Caesar's death.
Yeah, that was an interesting way. I guess, yeah, just going out quickly. Yeah, best way to go, honestly. Yeah, and I remember, if you've ever had to look at the famous Julius Caesar play, we had to in high school. Yeah, like his wife was having, dreams and nightmares, almost like vision-like things of Caesar's death, beware the Ides of March, and and Caesar's like, she's like, don't go to the Senate. He's like, well, I'm gonna go, and then she like eventually convinces him. He's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll stay. And then one random senator comes, I think it's Cassius, is like, oh, we were gonna actually, like, make you, I don't know, king or whatever. And he's like, alright, I'm going, bye. It's funny. If that's actually how it played out in real life, then yeah, Caesar made a mistake going at all, right?
And in the morning, when Caesar was making his sacrifices, they were all foreboding. A superstitious man, Caesar decided to cancel the meeting, sending Antony to dismiss the Senate. Caesar had also been drinking late the previous night, and a hangover might have been influencing his decision. When the conspirators heard of this, they sent Decimus to convince Caesar to come to the Senate. Decimus told Caesar that the Senate would be insulted unless he dismissed them in person, and Caesar relented, trusting his friend's judgment. Meanwhile, word of the conspiracy...
With friends like these, who needs enemies? But man, that's insane. Caesar almost could have, like, saved his own life right there. Wow.
...had started to leak. A friend of Caesar's had heard of the plot and didn't know the details. He immediately ran to Caesar's house to warn him, but finding Caesar had already left for the Senate, decided to wait at his house. Another friend would also find out about it that same day and ran to the theatre of Pompey to try and warn Caesar, but would arrive too late. Lastly, as Caesar was making his way
so close, like between canceling the Senate and these guys finding out, dude, it's funny because up to this point, Caesar's been the luckiest dude in the world, right? After everything he's come through. And this is where it's like all his luck's run out. It's like he's only rolling D1s now. Before he was rolling straight D20s. for those of you who play Dungeons and Dragons. Now he's only rolling ones. And it's like, oh my gosh, Caesar, bro. Yeah, you're lucky until you aren't. That's the thing about luck. It runs out. For some, much longer. It takes longer, but I find that luck eventually runs out, as it did with Napoleon, as it did with Alexander. It just eventually it just goes away, right?
to the theatre, someone slipped him a message. Surrounded by crowds of supporters and constantly having messages passed to him, Caesar slipped it into his robes without reading it.
Oh my gosh.
Later found on his
This is like a friggin' Tom and Jerry cartoon. It's like God himself is like trying to save Caesar. It's like God's like, Caesar, don't go. I'm giving your wife diapers. He's just like, oh, I'm gonna go. And then, and then it's like, let me send you like 20 messages preventing you. It's like, I'll either reach too late. It's like, oh my goodness. Man, there were like 5 chances he could have saved his life. That's insane to me.
Body, it was a warning of the upcoming assassination. When Caesar arrived at the theatre, Antony, the conspirators and the other senators were all there. The conspirators were acting casual, despite the daggers hidden under their togas, but they were secretly nervous. A man approached Casca and said, "Brutus has told me everything," which shocked Casca, before he realized that the man was referring to his intention to run for Edile. Another senator approached Caesar, talking to him in hushed tones. The conspirators grew anxious, Brutus subtly signaling that they were to kill themselves rather than be captured, before it became clear that the senator had simply been petitioning Caesar on another matter. Despite more bad sacrifices, Caesar was convinced to go ahead with the meeting and entered the chambers. The senators followed, but Antony was quickly pulled aside by Trebonius. Caesar, a veteran with 35 years of experience, was in good shape despite his age. Antony was known as a hedonist, and he was also a veteran of 10 years, strong, quick to anger, and an incredible soldier. Together, the two of them might have been able to fight a way out.
That would have been insane, right? Like, you see old Julius Caesar and Antony just beating up these senators, fighting their way out. That would have been awesome. But yeah, that was smarter than to get rid of Antony. And yeah, Antony's traits, as we know from the HBO show, very vulgar, very hedonistic, also a drunkard, I believe. So yeah, you know, it goes to show you, these senators weren't strong. I mean, they literally relied on their numbers, but not all of them were, like, I guess, soldiers, at least to the caliber of Caesar and Antony, so yeah. So that would have been insane if they had fought their way out with their fisticuffs, like, punching every senator in the way. So that would have been pretty Chad. Unfortunately, that's not how history played out.
So the conspirators had entrusted Trebonius, one of Antony's closest friends, with keeping him out of the way. Caesar was seated at the front of the Senate, under a statue of Pompey. Cimber approached Caesar, petitioning him to recall his brother from exile. The other conspirators gathered around, encircling Caesar, and suddenly Cimber pulled Caesar's toga down, exposing his shoulder, the signal for the attack. Caesar, who as dictator was protected by law, pushed Cimber back, saying, "This is violence." Casca, Caesar's childhood friend, then attacked the seated Caesar, but missed, only cutting his shoulder. Caesar grabbed Casca's hand, shouting, "Casca, what are you doing?" While Casca simultaneously shouted, "Brother, help me!" Caesar was able to rise and violently throw Casca away from him, but by the time he did, Casca's brother Servilius had attacked, stabbing him in the side. Caesar continued to fight back, but was attacked from all directions, Cassius slashing his face, Bucolianus stabbing him in the back, and Decimus slicing his thigh. Still, Caesar fought back as much as he could. Brutus was the next to approach him, and Caesar sunk down, either due to blood loss or having now lost the will to fight.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to stop, just the production value is insane. I'm loving this portrayal, but man, just the sheer panic that must have come, right? Like, thinking almost like you're untouchable by law and by, like, reputation, and just, like, now suddenly you see how mortal you are. Like, I don't know, I just imagine that must have been, like, something to Caesar, right? Like, dang. Just, yeah, man. Wow.
And Brutus stabbed him in the groin. Caesar
Et tu, Brute? Et tu, Brute? I don't think Caesar actually said it. That's just William Shakespeare throwing in his dramatic theater element, but but oh dang. Wow. It's just shocking. After everything we've seen him, the battles, the wars, the worthy adversaries, that this is the way he went out. It's just shocking to me, you know? For someone so almost untouchable, just completely destroyed like this, it is shocking. Even though obviously we all know what happens, it still is kind of like shocking.
Caesar pulled his toga over his head to hide his face, just as Pompey had done when he had been betrayed and murdered. Caesar resigned himself to his fate and died in a pool of blood at the base of the statue of Pompey. Suggestions that his last words were either "and you Brutus" or "and you my son" are largely disproven by the ancient sources, most simply saying he groaned in pain.
Yeah.
His body had...
I've never been stabbed, but I imagine if you're just getting stabbed like 20... How many times are you stabbed? Like over 20? Like, you probably don't have time for dramatic last words. You're like, just groaning. But it's almost symbolic that he dies in the feet of Pompey, right? Like, the statue, like that's real life dramatic, like, you know, I don't know, like, that's very theatrical for real life. It is shocking, just like, man, it's almost poetic in a weird way.
23 stab wounds, many of which happened after his death, when the conspirators had gathered around to stab his body, some even wounding each other. Only the 6 mentioned senators stabbed him while he was alive, which means that less than 1% of the Senate had actually taken part in the assassination. Furthermore, the analysis of his corpse at the time determined that only one, the attack from Servilius, was fatal. The fact that they could not strike a fatal blow on an unarmed, already wounded man perhaps tells us something about quite how panicked they were. Out of 60 conspirators, most did not even take part in the stabbing, suggesting that many had joined simply out of political opportunism. Gaius Julius Caesar had been assassinated by men who had either been spared by him or trusted as friends. Dio later...
And you died surrounded by your friends, Julius. Imagine someone like giving him a prophecy. You'll die old and surrounded by your friends. Like, that sounds great. Fast forward to this. Dang. Talk about the worst friends ever. You know, I also had bad friends before who kind of like turned on me. Well, not in the sense that they stabbed me, but you know, figuratively. They weren't the best, so I can understand having bad friends. And Julius Caesar had worse because they actually killed him, so ouch.
Wrote of Caesar that if he could have chosen, he probably would have wished he could have died at Munda as a soldier. Even the ancient historians who are critical of Caesar, such as Dio, recognize that such a death was somewhat of a tragic end. For some, Caesar was a warmongering tyrant, driven by a lust for personal glory. To others, Caesar was a leader who tried to fix a system that was clearly broken and was killed before that goal could be reached. Some see Caesar as a combination of both, or something in between. What all can agree on, however, is that Caesar changed the world. By accident or design, his actions ultimately led to the rise of the Roman Empire, and all the effects, good and bad, that would bring. Two of the most interesting things that Caesar has left us today are two questions. Did Caesar make the world a better place? And what would have happened if he had survived?
Good question. As for the first one, I don't know if the world's better, but I think it's cooler. I love the Roman Empire. I like it more than the Republic. And the wild things that happened with the Empire, honestly, like, I'm glad it happened. You know? And the Empire really has left a lasting change. To this day, you can still see the influence of Rome in the world, so, you know what? I would say that the Empire was good. Okay, I know that's like beyond debatable, and there are hundreds of factors, thousands, maybe millions that I'm not taking into account, but I think the Empire was pretty cool. I like it. But, so, whether he made the world better, I don't know, but he made it cooler. And it's the world I'm inhabiting at the moment, so I like it for the most part. Not perfect, it's kind of a mess, but I like it. As for what he would have done, greatest question, man. Who knows? Who knows?
We're planning to cover the civil wars in the aftermath of Caesar's assassination in the near future, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them.
So rip Julius, this has been a fun adventure with you, but we're not done yet. Now we're gonna follow the exploits of my personal favorite emperor and Roman of all time, Augustus. We are now going to enter the age of Augustus, so I'm really looking forward to that. Rip Julius Caesar. I don't know what to think of you, but in terms of a military commander, you were one of the greatest. So, rip. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.